Hello, John here. So today I want to talk about Nassim Nicholas Taleb's concept of anti-fragility. It's going to be really central to our understanding of the next episode of Black Mirror that we're watching, Archangel. So to understand this, well, first of all, to sort of introduce it, Taleb introduced this idea for the first time in The Black Swan. And then he developed it some more in The Bed of Procrustes. And then he devoted an entire book to it called Antifragile, which is definitely one of his best books. Very, very fascinating book. And the reason why he coined this new term was not to be cute. You know, a lot of academics and intellectuals sort of coin new words just sort of for the fun of it, you know, and they're often sort of just taking an existing concept and giving it a new name and calling it new when in fact it's just a rebranding of something that already exists. The concept of things being anti-fragile is actually a new idea. It's a concept that did not exist. So to understand that, it's probably best to talk about the two other things that it's often contrasted with, right? So there's things that are fragile. That's pretty straightforward, right? If you have a nice wine glass sitting on a counter and your cat comes over and paws it over and it falls on the ground, it's going to shatter, right? Because it's fragile. And if you are a little kid blowing bubbles and you make like a big bubble, it kind of floats around for a little bit, and then as soon as it touches something, it pops, right? So things that are fragile, it's pretty easy to understand, right? Then there are things that are robust, right? And a robust thing would be sort of like I'm sitting on a boulder right now here on in Mount Royal Park, and you know, it's a big huge boulder. It's looks like it's made out of granite, and that's a pretty perfect example of a robust thing, right? So robust things have a tendency to stay the same, right? No matter what happens to them. So if we just completely ignore this boulder for a couple of years and we come back, it's probably going to look more or less the same. If I kick this boulder really hard right now, I might break my toe, break my foot. But probably I'm not going to affect the boulder in any way, right? So things that are robust have a tendency to stay the same, regardless of what happens to them. Right now, of course, I guess if I waited long enough, then eventually rain and erosion and things like that would gradually start to wear down this boulder. But generally speaking, when things are robust, they stay the same, right? Now, what Taleb noticed was that this scheme had a problem with it, right? And the problem is that it didn't adequately explain living systems or living things, right? Because living things you can't really adequately describe them as being robust or fragile, because living things generally respond positively to stress within limits. Right, so they tend to, and they also respond negatively if they are not subject to adequate stress. So, for instance, the classic examples of this are the human, let's say the musculature system or the skeletal system. Right, both of those systems, if they are deprived of stress, they actually start to degenerate quite rapidly, right? And so the classic example of this is when they first started sending astronauts up into space for extended periods of time on spaceships and in space stations and things like that. They ran into a problem where these astronauts would come back after being in a largely weightless environment, and you know, they went up into space in kind of amazing, phenomenal condition, right? The kind of physical condition you have to be in order to be an astronaut. So they went up there in kind of Olympic athlete condition as super healthy people in their late 20s, early 30s kind of thing. And they would come back and there's one famous example of an astronaut who like just tripped on some stairs and broke his leg in I think like 3 places or something. And in the X-ray, what they found is this guy's leg looked like Swiss cheese. I mean, it looked like his bones looked like the bones of a elderly woman who has advanced osteoporosis, right? So the bones had demineralized quite a bit, to the point where they had become brittle. They looked like almost like bird bones, right? And the same thing happens if people are in, let's say, a really bad accident and they are laid up in a hospital for a long time and they have to they don't get any exercise, any movement. Your muscles will start to atrophy quite rapidly. So I mean, it's kind of amazing. I remember one of my mom's friends. She was the little sister of her boyfriend at the time, but she ended up having to go she had to get like an operation for something bad, like some sort of cancer or something like that. She had to get something taken out, and anyway, she had been like this super healthy person who did like marathons and was like crazy fit, but because she was in the hospital, laid out in recovery for a number of months with no activity, when she got out, her muscles had atrophied to the point where she could barely walk, right? I mean, she did physiotherapy and she got all of her strength back, and she was running marathons before long. But so our musculature system and our bones, they need to be subjected to stress on a regular basis in order to just to maintain homeostasis, right? Now, if you go in the other direction, if you start lifting weights, for instance, then what'll happen is you'll cause little tears in your muscles, right? And these tears, like, then your body, when you're recovering, your body will build up your muscles bigger and stronger than before, so that they're ready to deal with that stress the next time it happens, right? And likewise, when a lot of people don't realize this because it doesn't show through your tight t-shirt as much as the muscles do. But if you start lifting weight and lifting some serious weight, it affects your bones just as much as your muscles. So you get these like sort of micro fractures in your bones, which then your bones heal up stronger and more kind of denser and all that stuff, right? So when you lift weight, you are sort of putting stress on your joints, on your muscles, on your bones, and you're provoking an antifragile response. So all of those things grow back stronger, right? Now, probably one of the most extreme examples I've ever seen of this was Thai kickboxers, right? So Thai kickboxers, they will sort of do this training where they just constantly kick these, I think they're called like banana trees or something like that. They kick these trees with their shins, and they do this until their shins bleed and are horribly bruised, right? And then they let them heal, and then they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. And gradually over time, right, I've seen these amazing, you can find it on the if you Google it, you can find it. It's just absolutely nuts. They showed like these x-rays of these Thai kickboxers, of their legs, and what you see is that the bones in their shins have actually grown back stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where it looks, like twice the size of a normal human male shin bone, or it's unbelievable, right? And then obviously they're very well muscled as well. But then the skin, right? Your skin is also a living system, and so therefore is also subject to what Taleb calls antifragility. So your skin has an antifragile response to being subjected to that stress of kicking the banana trees on a regular basis. So the skin on these Thai kickboxers, on their shins, it looks like leather, right? It looks like a couple of times thicker than the soles of your feet, right, on a normal person. So I remember this example. There was a Montreal guy who went to Thailand to study Thai kickboxing, and he did it for like a number of years, and he came back and they had this whole interview of him like on some local news organization. I can't remember which one, but one of the things the guy did is he took like push pins, like you have in a corkboard, and he took these pins and he stuck them right in his shins, like one after another, and the guy had no pain sticking these pins right inside his shins, and then when he pulled them out, there was no blood whatsoever. So his the skin had grown back so thick on his shins that he had this like thick, basically like an animal hide or something on his shins. And then so when you have like a very powerful legs that where you've built up the muscles, built up the bone, and built up the skin on top of that. That's why those Thai kickboxers, if they kick you, they can, it's like getting kicked by a mule. Like they can break your leg just from kicking you. They can break ribs just from like a kick. Because it's like you're getting kicked by a sledgehammer. It's this unbelievable thing, right? So anti-fragility is really, really central importance to, there's another book that we've talked about quite a bit, which is The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, right? And they sort of piggyback on Taleb's, very self-consciously, right? They piggyback on Taleb's notion of anti-fragility, and they use this as a way to understand all sorts of problems that we're seeing right now with the younger generations, where they've got epidemic levels of depression and anxiety and all these problems. So they argue that if you deprive young people of stressors, if you create kind of the helicopter parenting situation, right, where you create these bubble wrapped world where like you never have to encounter anything that's upsetting or triggering or any of that stuff, that although this comes from a very loving, kind place, right, this is it can inadvertently lead to like fragility. So you'll end up in the same way that those astronauts coming down from a zero gravity environment, like suddenly their bones and their muscles can't deal with just the regular stress of the atmospheric pressure of being like a person on planet Earth, right? Likewise, that if you're deprived of stressors, then you can run into this problem where you just you can't deal with regular life, right? Now, of course, the quintessential example of this that Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff talk about a great deal in The Coddling of the American Mind is the whole issue with peanut allergies, right? So here you had a situation where it seemed like a fair number of people, and it seemed to be increasing to some extent, of kids were developing peanut allergies. And so they said, well, this is horrible, right? So what we need to do is we need to get peanuts out of everything, right? And we have to, like make sure that all manufacturers don't have any peanuts in any of their things, in any of their like chocolate bars or any of that stuff, right? So they made all these changes, right? And I actually remember when this all happened, because Annalise and I, like our sons, Tristan and Indy, were just starting off elementary school when this happened, and they banned all peanut butter from the school grounds, and this just drove Indy crazy, because his favorite thing to have at the time for lunch was a peanut butter sandwich. But suddenly they were like, "Nah, you can't have this at all," and And they were really intense about it. Like, there was a couple of times where, for a number of reasons, you know, he ended up either making himself a peanut butter sandwich and like sneaking it in his bag, or we would have a family member who, an older, like let's say my mom or something, or somebody who hadn't got the memo that suddenly peanut butter was like the devil, and would give him a peanut butter sandwich. And when the principal or the vice principal would call us up and say, hey, Indy brought in like a peanut butter sandwich, like the moral indignation and the anger and the craziness, like you would think that he brought in like a loaded AK-47 and along with like a kilo of heroin that he was giving out to his classmates. Like they were just so freaked out about this peanut butter. So anyway, so they banned peanut butter everywhere, and lo and behold, it did not have the effect that they were hoping it would have. In fact, what happened is suddenly the number of kids with peanut allergies went way up. What's worse, the number of kids with severe peanut allergies that were life-threatening went way up. And the number of kids dying of anaphylactic shock induced by contact with peanuts, that went way up as well, right? So this attempt to try and make the world much safer inadvertently ended up making the world much more dangerous, right? And so what has happened is all over the world, they've kind of reversed their position, right? And so I remember in my just last year, God, I love this time of year. Just last year, the Montreal School Board kind of totally backtracked and said that was a mistake. Peanut butter is totally fine again. You can send your kids to school with peanut butter sandwiches again. And now the received wisdom now is that actually you should introduce small amounts of peanut butter, like peanut, to kids when they're young, so that they get used to it. And that right. So it's just this very weird situation. And so what Haidt and Lukyanov argue is that it's very similar to a lot of things, that very often the problem with safetyism is that in trying to remove all potential stressors, you don't necessarily make the world safer, right? Now I want you to keep this in mind when you're watching the next episode that we're going to be discussing, the Black Mirror episode Archangel, because here you have it's set, in the future, as Black Mirror usually is, right? And it's a world where it is possible for really overprotective helicopter parents to actually put an implant in their kid's head, which allows you to track their location constantly. But it also allows you to put sort of like parental controls on your kids in their own head, right? So you can prevent them from ever seeing something violent or sexual or upsetting in any way. They can't hear anything upsetting. So you're creating like a completely, like the world is one giant safe space for them, right? In terms of their perception of it, at least, right? And as you'll see in the episode, it doesn't end very well, right? It doesn't work well at all. In fact, it ends up destroying the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and more importantly, it ends up making the daughter very fragile, right? So when she doesn't have all these protections in place, she is very fragile. She ends up just falling apart at the slightest thing, right? Okay, now just one caveat. I absolutely Nassim Nicholas Taleb would be the first one to say that living systems, or any kind of system, an ecosystem, a market, any of these things, they're always anti-fragile to a point, right? So people love to quote the line from Nietzsche where he says, what does not kill me makes me stronger, right? Now, I'm sure Nietzsche would be the first to say, like Taleb, that, well, that doesn't mean that everything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, right? There's some things that happen to you that screw you up so badly. There's some accidents that you may survive the accident in terms of like it didn't kill you, but you're never going to be the same, right? And there's some kind of abuse and trauma that is so terrible that people never recover from it, right? So I'm not in any way saying that all stress and all trauma necessarily leads to some kind of growth, but a lot more does than we allow for these days. And also we need to understand that if somebody is actually healthy, mentally and physically healthy, that it's okay to be exposed to a certain amount of stress, and that actually is what is required for good health, right? But anyhow, I will end there, and I will have another video for you soon.